Welcome to Managing a Windows 2012 Server Environment. I am your instructor, Robert McMillen. Our study materials used is the book called Inside Out Windows Server 2012, written by William R. Stanek. This is Part 3, Lab 2. We're going to discuss Managing Windows Server 2012 Storage and File Systems. In this lab, we're going to talk about managing file system types, file sharing and security, and managing backups and recovery. Let's start with the managing file system types. When you go to format a drive, you have a couple of options. One is the FAT option, the other is the NTFS. With the FAT option, that is the original option that came with Windows years ago. You can format the drive this way, but it doesn't allow you to do the type of granular management that you can do with NTFS. For instance, you can set the security and the sharing on the folder level with FAT, but you cannot do it on the file level like you can with NTFS. NTFS stands for New Technology File Service, and it does allow for some additional features, and there's also advanced features that you can do with that. Some of those advanced features are hard links, data streams, change journals, object identifiers, transactions, sparse files, and others that are mentioned in the book that I had discussed at the beginning of this lab. So to learn more about that, just go ahead and look that up in the book, and you can learn more about those advanced features. REFS is a different type of technology. REFS allows for the management of hard drives in a way that's similar to NTFS, except for it does it at 2 to the 128th power, which means it allows you to have much longer file names, and it supports much larger storage file sizes. So REFS is certainly something that you can utilize with Windows Server 2012 should you choose to. It stands for Resilient File System. So let's go ahead and take a look at formatting a drive. We'll go back to our computer management and disk management. So we see our volume drive that we did earlier. I'm going to go ahead and choose Format. Now you can see we've got NTFS, we've got FAT32, and we've got REFS. So if we were to choose the FAT32, we could go ahead and do that. Quick format. And now we have a FAT32 drive. The NTFS drive is still on the E drive. So why would you want to even bother with FAT32 if it doesn't give you nearly as much functionality as NTFS or REFS? Well, the reason for that is because if you want to communicate with Linux or Macintosh Unix type computers, they do not understand the NTFS file system, so you'll want to use FAT32. So if you need to copy files back and forth between, say, a Macintosh, for instance, then you'll format the drive with FAT32, and then you can say on a thumb drive, and then you can copy it to that, pull it out, put it into the Macintosh, and it will recognize that FAT32, and you'll be able to copy the files over. So that's the reason why that's even still there, although it becomes less and less needed as time goes on. Let's now talk about file sharing and security. So there are shares, and there is security, and then there's managing the outcome. So setting up a share is something you would do so you could see data from a workstation on a server. The security tab, which is also the NTFS security tab, is mainly for when accessing files when you are logging in locally to the server. Now this could mean the administrator logging in locally to the server. It could also mean a user logging into remote desktop services, which is also technically logging in locally to the server. So when you're logging in locally, you use the NTFS security. When you log in or you connect to shares remotely, then you'll want to set up the share. Now the two of those work together in a way that you'll have to understand in order to manage the outcome. So let's go ahead and create a new folder, and we'll just call it test. If we right click on that folder and choose properties, you see a security tab. And the security tab says that the administrator has full rights to that. Now there's a sharing tab. You have two options. You can do basic sharing or advanced sharing. I like to choose advanced sharing. It gives you a little bit better options. Go ahead and click share this folder. It defaults to the name of the folder, which is test, and that's fine. And the default permissions are that everyone has read-only. We're going to go ahead and say everyone has full control. So typically that's what you want to do, is set everyone to full control on the shares. And then you want to lock it down on the security, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so once we've added sharing for everyone, full access, and we have security set for just the administrator, then what we have is the outcome. And the outcome in this particular case is that the administrator is going to have full access, because you have the administrator with full access on the security tab, and you have everyone has full access on the sharing tab. If you take full access and full access, then you take the most restrictive of those two, and then that's what you end up with. In this particular case, the most restrictive is still full access. Now, if I have a guest user, for instance, and the guest user is part of everyone when you go to sharing, but the guest user is missing from security. So if you take no access plus full access, you end up with the most restrictive, which is no access. So keep that in mind when you go to set permissions for groups and users, that you add up all the sharing on this tab, and you add up all the security on this tab, and then you take the most restrictive of those two. Now you can go into advanced and you can see that for yourself. It's called effective access. So if we click on select a user, we'll choose the administrator, check name, click OK, and then view effective access. And you can see full control. So if a user doesn't have the access that you're expecting them to have, go to that folder, go to the properties, click on the security tab, and then click on advanced and use the effective access tab to tell you what is the effective access of the share and security permissions. Let's talk about managing backups and recovery. There are multiple types of backups. There's the full backup, there's the incremental, differential, copy backup, multiple different types of backups, and they all do different things. Also daily backup. And Windows Server comes with a free backup program, and it'll only do two of those types of backups. It'll do full backup and incremental backup. So I'll explain what that means. First, we'll go ahead and install Windows Server Backup in the Features section, the Features area which I showed you earlier in a previous lab. And let's go ahead and get the correct program up here. All right, so we are now in Windows Server Backup, and it's local backup. So Windows Server can only back up the computer that you are on. You cannot back up other servers while you're on just this one computer. So that means you have to set up Windows Server Backup on every single server. Or you can use a third-party backup, which does allow you to do that. So if we look at local backup, and we're just going to go ahead and choose to back up once. You can also back up on a schedule, set a date and time where it backs up every night the same way. Click on backup once. Next, we can choose the full server, or we can just choose custom. Next, we can add items, and we can choose the system state, which has all the information about how Active Directory is set up, or how the server is set up itself without the data. We have bare metal recovery, which will allow you to back up everything on the C drive and allow you to restore everything back to the way it was on the C drive. Or we could just use the C drive itself and back up individual files or some of the other drives there, and you can check individual files or folders if you'd like. All right, the next thing it's going to ask is the type of storage for the backup. Do you want to do the local drive, or do you want to choose a remote shared folder? Well, we're just going to go ahead and choose the local drive. We'll choose that 3 GB partition we created earlier. And now we're going to go ahead and choose the backup. And backup, depending on how much backup data you're backing up or how fast the server is. It could take just a few seconds or it could take several hours. So it's really hard to say. So this one's going pretty quickly, and it is creating a shadow copy of the volume so that way the system state can continue running while it does the backup. If shadow copied was not running, then you wouldn't be able to do that. So there it goes. It sees all those files and it's backing that up. You can see the total amount we're going to back up is 91 megabytes. And so far it's backed up 0 kilobytes as it does all the background information that it needs to have done. So when that's done, now we're up to even more megabytes. 68, 1 gig, 1.5 gigs, thousands of files. So this is going to take a little while. It'll go ahead and run. While we're waiting for that to go, we can take a look at a third-party program. So this is a third-party program called Semantic Backup Exec, and you can see that this particular program allows us from one server to back up a lot of different servers, and you can even back up multiple servers at once. You see that it has multiple different servers all running at the same time. So it also tells you whether the last backup was successful or not. Green is good, yellow is actually not bad, it means it backed up, but it missed a few files, and then red means that it failed. So we mostly have successful backups here. You can hone in on a particular backup if you want, just by double clicking on the server, and then from here you can right click and you can edit the backups. And you can change what it is that you're backing up or how often or what device you back up to. So there's a third-party program that many of you may find useful. Alright, so let's go back and you can see that it's going on and on and on. 4 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes. So this is going to continue on, but we're just going to go ahead and cancel that because you get the idea. And recover is the opposite of backing up. Recover allows you to restore data that you backed up previously. You locate the files that you backed up, which we haven't done this particular time, and then it restores it back to the original location. You can also restore it to an alternate location if you choose. So what it'll do is the first time it backs up, it'll back up a full backup, and then if you back up on a schedule, it will back up only the files that have changed since the last full backup. That's called an incremental. So the different recovery types: bare metal, we talked about earlier, file only, which I showed you, offsite backup and recovery, and system state. System state, as I mentioned, is just the state of the server when it went down, not necessarily the data. Offsite backup recovery, that's also an option nowadays. You can back up offsite. Most offsite backup companies do not allow bare metal restoration, meaning if your server completely dies, you need to restore everything to a new server. You won't be able to do that. There are some companies that do offer the bare metal restoration, but the cost is so much more, and it takes much longer to restore than if you just did a local backup for free. So there are some options there for offsite backup, but the best option is still to back up locally and take a copy with you offsite. So in summary, we discussed managing file system types, file sharing and security, managing backups and recovery. Our next lab is part 4, lab 1, network and domain services.